everyone, and welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann. You can call me H. And joining me today is not Q, who is moving across the country again. The guy can't get enough of his cross-country moves. I tell him, you really got to stop doing this, but the spirit of adventure calls for him. You know, he's out there fording rivers and catching dysentery, and he loves it. He loves it every step of the way. So in his stead today, we have from the Cane and Rinse podcast, Mr. Brian Edwards.
Hello, Ryan. Thank you for having me. I'm not a good substitute for Q, but I will do the best I can to not contract cholera and sink my wagon in the river along the way of this podcast. So thank you for having me.
I mean, if anything, that would give you a really strong narrative to tell.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I all I did was go on the Playwright podcast, and all I got was this lousy case of cholera. type of situation. No, I'm thrilled to be here. Big fan of the show. I've been listening for a long time, and yeah, I'm happy to have the opportunity to come on.
Well, thank you. I guess just to give our audiences some familiarity with you, let's get like a general, like a really brief, who are you? And then like, what kinds of games do you typically like to play? What is your like base of inspiration you're drawing from?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'm in my mid-30s from Western New York. I've been playing games basically since I can remember playing games. My parents had an Atari 2600 before I was born, and that's kind of where I'm at. As far as now, what type of games I play is I'm kind of someone who's always looking for something a little bit different. I guess you could say my baseline's probably your open world action adventure games are kind of my thing. If we joke a lot about favorite games of all time, which is kind of very difficult to narrow down, but you could throw things like your Legend of Zelda Ocarina's of Times and your Horizon Zero Dawns on there, and but also I am currently playing Death Stranding, and I'm 35 hours into my role as a fantasy UPS delivery man, and I'm loving every minute of that too. So yeah, I'm kind of have an eclectic taste for games. I think first for anybody who kind of gets involved in any of this type of stuff, podcasting and talking about games, you find yourself kind of drawn and inspired to try out different things because you hear other people so frequently talk so enthusiastically about the things they like. So I've definitely got more. My tastes are getting wider as I get older, which is kind of nice. So
I guess as we get into the video game pitches here, we always like to give the guests the opportunity to choose. Would you like to, do you have something that's kind of bubbling up and you would like to get out right away, or would you like to kind of go second and get a feel for how it goes?
No, I'd love to go first. I've been thinking, thinking about most of the day.
Let's have at it then.
All right. So my idea was, as someone who's recently started playing the Yakuza games, I started with Yakuza 0, and there's this entrance where Majima Goro is introduced to the player, and he is the manager of a nightclub, and that's all we really know about him. And it got me thinking kind of about a game where you would be the manager of a nightclub, the manager of a bar or restaurant, but specifically this bar or restaurant is the hangout for the local bad guys, whether it be you could think of Majima Goro's club from Yakuza, or even the bar from, or the Italian restaurant from Goodfellas, where all the guys take their wives on one night and then their girlfriends on the other nights for dinner and entertainment in that movie. But basically, you're going to play in this idea I had as the manager of that establishment, and kind of seeing and managing your business almost in the way I had kind of thought about it is almost, Yakuza meets Lemonade Stand in a lot of ways, okay, where you'd be doing things like you'd be setting the menu and picking the entertainment and trying to draw in a certain amount of the shady element that also has the money.
So let's go ahead and start the clock there. What this makes me think of immediately is kind of the risk reward of attracting the right kind of criminals.
Okay.
And maybe discouraging the types of behavior. I think about like, there are certain places within fiction, like I'm not remembering the name now, the kind of safe haven in the John Wick films.
The hotel. Yeah, I can't remember the name either. Yeah, we're people are definitely not shouting right now as they're hearing us.
Yeah. But it is this kind of like revered space, which is really interesting, and it definitely seems to be the type of place where obviously things go down as the narrative of those movies unfold, but it's for all intents and purposes, day to day, it's a lot of money coming in without any of the expense of the risk that criminals bring to it, bringing it under. On the flip side, I always think about the Italian restaurant from The Godfather, the first Godfather film, where Michael takes out the guy who's selling drugs and then the crooked captain as well. And, the type of restaurant that would be used as a place to, I guess, low key dispose of people
take care of business.
Yeah, right.
I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting. Because
is there a sense of like working your way up? Is there a sense of how do you attract the right type of like lucrative under the table business and discourage the type of bloody business?
See, I like the idea of that. I mean, you might start as like that restaurant. I mean, not that specific one, but thinking of The Godfather, start as kind of the dive where the dirty business takes place, and you've got to kind of build your way up, kind of like a rags to riches story of attracting the right type of criminal to your establishment. Diner Dash, and even in a certain case, Overcooked, where you'd have these segments where, business would be taking place or the meal would be getting cooked, and you kind of get this rating at the end of it. In this instance, you could almost see that as, you're setting up the menu and trying to, advertise or spend money in these different areas to attract the right clientele. And if there's a murder at your store that night, maybe you get a C, but if you manage to just only have some light extortion take place or something like that, as the narrative progresses, you could even see that, your establishment, you get bigger, you can pay for some nicer floors, some nicer light fixtures. I think that's a cool idea.
Yeah, I think kind of upscaling the place is a way to attract the right type of criminal. It seems pretty straightforward, but also let's think about snitching and the associated stitching that would occasionally take place.
As the adage goes.
If you have really high risk villains coming in, villains feel like such a romantic word for it, criminals. Yeah. Somebody who would be like played by Nick Cage in a movie, somebody who's loud and brash and out there and violent and unpredictable. Like, maybe he's somebody you go into the back room and you call the police on him to try to like get him out, and he's scaring away the better customers. But at the same time, if you gain a reputation of calling the police, or if the police end up showing up a little bit more than they're supposed to, then maybe that's not desirable.
Yeah, detracts.
So, maybe there's other ways around that. Maybe you can make people disappear through your own criminal connections, but then you're kind of in the mud as well. And maybe you want to keep your hands clean. So I don't know if there's balancing acts to be done there.
Oh, I think that's I think that's really neat, because then you could even have, I don't want to call them a police and crime meter or like even like a Paragon Renegade type style. But I imagine like a few different bars at the bottom of the screen. You're blue for the police, you're red for the criminal, and maybe another one, but maybe spending some of your money from the from your take in order to bribe some crooked policemen to maybe look the other way, like if maybe pay for some body disposal service if necessary.
Yeah,
I didn't. When I came up with this idea, I didn't think of it as dark as it is, but it's almost like the GTA Chinatown Wars, like you're setting up your drug network type of thing, where you could kind of as you expand that empire, as you expand what you're doing, you have to balance the relationships that you have with the authorities, the improper authorities, and the criminal element. So yeah, when you said that, I immediately thought of kind of like a top down, almost like a CRPG kind of point of view, where you could see the restaurant, but then you could also see the little hallway with the steps going to the room that doesn't have any windows and has a drain in the middle of the floor, like that room, and kind of building out your restaurant or your establishment in almost like even in a Sim Tower or Sim City type of way. Just kind of building up around that. That's it. I never quite thought of it as a management sim like that, but that's kind of what I could kind of envision it turning into that.
There's another game, and I've never played it, but I've been kind of acquainted with it, and I'm a fan of the premises anyways. premise, rather, of Serial Cleaner. It is a
Yes.
game in which you play somebody who's there to clean up after either a bloody gunfight or a murder or something that takes place, and you're there to just kind of under a strict time limit before the cops arrive to make it seem like nothing ever happened in this place. And I wonder if there's mini games you could play. You know, I hesitate to get too wacky with this, but you know, the more elements that you incorporate,
I think the wackier the better might serve it, because I think if you take it at face value as what it's doing, it could be, if it's too realistic, I think it could be a little bit of a downer. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to encourage it being a good time extortion racket criminal element, but I also, if it's too true to life, it might be a little disturbing. But I hadn't thought about that. I do like the idea of a good mini game in any way, shape, or form. Even something to the effect of where you can, like, different mini games, maybe in the style of Bully or something like that, where if you're preparing the menu for the night, you could there'd be a kitchen style mini game where you get a rating at the end of that mini game that would determine the quality of the food that came out that evening. Maybe if you have a band as the entertainment for that night, you could have a dancing mini game or something like that. And then even for like maybe disposing of rowdy patrons, you could even have like almost like a dialogue skill check type of mini game where if you pick the right way responses, maybe you could talk them down or convince them to leave rather than them busting up your nice chandeliers you just spent your hard-earned money on or something like that. I love the idea of a management game anyway. I'm pretty all in on your Stardew Valleys, your Harvest Moons, and things like that. So I like the idea of, if you introduce some of those mini games like you talk about along with that management sim, and then kind of the seedier element of it too. You could kind of hit a few different bases with the same game. That'd be kind of fun.
One of the things I like about mafia movies and literature and stuff is that it's all about the family loyalties and kind of choosing where to put your trust and your money and your time and your effort, because the family that's on top one day might be completely underwater the next, maybe literally in some cases. And it's, it would be interesting if you, obviously you have a limited supply of money. You kind of want to put on the best performance for the high-ranking officials in a certain mafia or whatever it is when they come rolling in. Maybe you choose the wrong family, they end up getting kind of taken out, and then all of a sudden you just wasted a bunch of money, you're understaffed and undersupplied because the long-term investment that you were expecting didn't end up paying out.
So yeah, you might even end up playing, taking that point even further, playing one family against another. If you could see kind of the trends of, what family maybe is gaining more territory, maybe you court those, underbosses in hopes that the Don walks in your restaurant some nights and, gets bottle service for his VIP suite or something. Yeah. That's a cool idea with the competing families. I think of the, like you said, from the mafia game, well, mafia literature in general, but even like in your Grand Theft Auto San Andreas's of the world, where you kind of see that map of the city with the highlighted colors and the overlapping and what areas are warring for territory. Maybe even your restaurant, or you could even pick locations based on that. We're going to move the establishment into this territory because we're going to focus on this family. That could be, that could add another element of kind of switching it all around too.
Right, we're out of time on that one. We've reached our 10 minutes, and so we have to close it down.
That goes fast.
It does fly right by.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
We have to close it down and come up with a name.
Before we talked about all this, I hadn't really come up with a name, but I like the name The Joint, maybe, or not The Hangout. That's a little too on the nose, but I like something with the term joint. I'm not sure.
I was also thinking of, and this is maybe a little bit too many steps down the trail, but Dawn, like the dawn of a mafia, Dawn Appétit.
That's the name. Don Appétit. I think that is, you know what, if we're, and going back to what we were talking about before, like if you're going to try to toe that comical line with it, I think that that sells the image right there, because you're automatically going into the game Don Appétit. Like I go into that game with a smile on my face just before I even hit start. So yeah, that's perfect.
All right, cool. Catch them off guard with all the really dark stuff then.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's go on to my pitch for today. I really enjoy doing karaoke. and my partner is kind of so-so on it, and it's been so long since I've been able to convince her to actually like go do karaoke with me.
Okay.
When I was there, it's so much fun to just, push your own limits. Because some days you have like real off days where you're having a hard time kind of hitting the notes, and you just kind of end up falling into a lower register where it's a little bit safer. You're not taking that many risks.
Yeah, I live in that low register, no risk zone. That's where I tend to operate in karaoke.
And some days like you're feeling good about yourself, whether you've had enough to drink or whether you are actually more capable at singing that particular evening. And you see those high notes come in, you see those risky notes, and those ones that are a real kind of just jab in a certain direction, and you just kind of cross your fingers, hope they hit, and you go for them. So simultaneously, I've been playing over the past week or so Disco Elysium.
Oh, nice.
Which is a CRPG, as we mentioned earlier, which is you play a detective set in a kind of dystopic type of world, trying to solve a murder mystery while also trying to uncover some details about your own past. And that one plays out under really kind of like interesting Dungeons and Dragons type rules of dice rolls and skill checks and that kind of thing. And so I was thinking of kind of combining the two. What would it look like if you had a CRPG style karaoke game with stat checks and dice rolls and upgradable stats and such? I wonder if that level of risk taking and choice making on the fly could be applied to something so musical. So let's start the clock and see if we can take that anywhere.
I love the idea of some RNG karaoke. I'm already thinking of like you taking an underleveled character into the karaoke joint, and I keep saying joint now, into the karaoke place, going for that high note, knowing you have just the slightest chance of hitting it, but you pass that skill check and you roll the 10 and you get it. That is That's an interesting idea. I think that you could really branch that out. Now, when you were thinking about the karaoke game, were you thinking of it like from a point of view of like taking place in the one karaoke spot, or maybe would this be kind of a tour of like the karaoke places around your city where your character might have to get good enough to then graduate to the next and on to the next?
Yeah, possibly. You know, I was thinking about what are the risk reward aspects of karaoke. You know, if you lose an encounter, so to speak, I really like in Disco Elysium that when you end up losing certain stat checks, it has a negative effect against either your health, which if that is reduced to 0, then your character just has a heart attack and dies.
Huh. Okay.
And so, you know, any kind of strenuous activity is being checked against your physical stats. And then can potentially subtract from your potentially only 1 health point if you've not chosen to invest in that. Similarly, there's a mental stat that kind of shows your mental resiliency, and you can check against that. And if you don't succeed, then your character gets really depressed. I ended up, not to get too off track, I had a situation in Disco Elysium where there was a young girl standing in front of a bookshop, and she was very interested in detective literature. And so I said to her, like, "Hey, I'm a detective." And she's like, "Oh, that's great. You know, could you deduce something about me using your detective skills?" And I had a very high chance of passing it, but I rolled the stat check and it ended up coming out at a loss. And my character just ended up saying like, well, you're very small. That moment was so embarrassing for him. He got so depressed that he ended up quitting the police force. And I got this nice kind of like newspaper printout, detective quits police force. And I got a very well-deserved game over.
Oh, that's funny. That's, I can see that. I'm not lifting it directly from Disco Elysium, but I could see that applying to this game completely.
Yeah, you have different levels of like confidence.
Yeah, confidence. Maybe like you're instead of luck, maybe it's a charisma or like a yeah. And then you could have like a pure raw singing talent. I kind of see as like your strength equivalent. You know what I mean? Like if you're gonna just be the tank your way through, just bash your head against everything, you could just put all your points into singing talent and just get by on that. You know, maybe your improvisation skills.
I think there's different types of talent in singing as well. You know, you get the people who are just like very crisp and can just hit the exact right note. You know, the Bruno Mars type, where it's like that's incredible with how like precise you're being in here. And then there's the type who aren't as precise, but have just like the raw kind of kick-ass power behind their voice, you know, the Joan Jett type.
Absolutely.
Where it's just like you can sing the doors off of a van, you know? It's like you can shatter windows with your voice.
Absolutely.
If you want to. You have that raw power there, and the sheer kind of confidence and power can kind of can compensate for maybe, you know, warming up to a note rather than hitting it right off.
Yeah.
And then you get the people who can't really sing well, but have the flair to do the whole lounge act or whatever.
Absolutely.
And then that can be just as entertaining.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too, is that we definitely have to have, not have to, but I would suggest in this game we have a way to spec your character in a way to where you're the person that cannot sing very well, but boy, everybody just loves when you take the mic. You're William Hungs of the world, mind you.
Yeah.
You're people that like, you're watching the performance, you could care less about the voice talent. Yeah, there's room for nuance there, Ryan. I think like you could really get granular with it. I also like the idea, as we're talking about these stat checks, different substances you could perhaps imbibe in, changing your stats pre-song, like, you know,
kind of like a After Party, which just came out recently.
Absolutely, yeah. If you have, let's say, a vodka tonic before going on, your singing skill might go down, but your charisma might go up, or you know, or you could different stat checks based on consumables, or perhaps you could there's a threshold to where if you have a certain amount, it will be beneficial, but then if you then cross over a line, perhaps you get a significant stat drop off. So there could be some risk reward there.
I think it'd be more interesting if instead of a straight drop off, it could be like, it could just get ultra risky, where you can either like win big a very low percentage of the time, or you could like really tank a performance quickly.
Yeah, the old I'm going to have 9 beers and then sing Let It Go from Frozen, and you think it's going to go over
and
great.
It might be perfect.
Yes, it might be.
You never know, because since it is a complete dice roll at that point, it might be the best performance anyone's ever made.
Exactly. I also, and this is not to go too far down the inebriation path, but I also like the idea of your character coming off stage thinking that you have just nailed it. And then the crowd just letting you know that you just specifically did not nail that. You know, that you were operating on bravado and not much else.
Yeah, if the level of inebriation also decrease the amount of feedback that you are getting kind of mid-performance. So you're not able to kind of manually course correct like you would if you went into it more sober.
I get the idea of like during your performance, maybe if you look out in the crowd and you would see either thought bubbles come out of people's heads, almost Sim style with like emojis, you know, like the smiley face or like musical notes or, you know, the classic, you know, puke emoji or whatever. But if you were too inebriated, those would just be kind of like a faint haze. So you couldn't really tell what response you're getting. I think that could be a really good time.
Or in a lot of the kind of Korean and Japanese karaoke bars, they have scoring that's built into the system itself.
Okay.
Kind of like playing a game of Rock Band, you know, they have, they kind of track how well you do. And then they have kind of on-screen visuals that change as you do better or worse. But one thing I was thinking is that if this game is kind of built around the singing, which makes sense, I feel like that is kind of like an RPG that is all random encounter battles. You know, I feel like there has to be more to the game, more of your character's life that you're living, and I want it all kind of feed back to the singing, because I feel like that's kind of a funny thing as well. Like everything that you do in your life is in service of this one particular thing. You know, it's like Pokemon or something, where like these characters are all they do and think about, and the world that they live in is all built around battling.
Yeah, you go to the store during the day, and there's just people having sing-offs on the street, and everybody's talking about you know what outfit they're going to wear that night. That's the other thing I was going to bring up too. In service of that, would you see your character as this karaoke hero or whoever we're gonna your protagonist? Would they have a daily life? Would they have like a run-of-the-mill day job, and you know they're daydreaming of karaoke, or are we specifically focusing on the on the time at the karaoke place.
Yeah, I think there should be something outside of the singing.
Okay.
Whether that is just your character's social life, like I don't want it to get too mundane. I don't want it to be like a job simulator necessarily, or like a cart life type thing where you're just trying to struggling to get by. I think that like karaoke is something that people do because they have an abundance of wealth and free time already, and like I want to keep it kind of like light and airy. But
I like the idea of it having
some sort of a story around it.
Right. Yeah, I like the idea of having a narrative, but the narrative isn't like the grandiose, this person's going to get discovered and like become a superstar. It's just like, they're going to be just like the talk of the town karaoke wise. They're going to get the, their name's going to be on the flyer one night, and that's like, their name gets put on the flyer for karaoke and it's roll credits, that type of thing. They just want that local notoriety just to be known as like the person for karaoke.
Or maybe there's like a retired rock star in the town, like a Ronnie James Dio or somebody that's like kind of beyond his prime and is just kind of like now is like tending a library or something, just, happy in his retirement.
Yeah,
and everyone is always like, oh man, it would be great if he could like come out and sing again. And then like maybe it kind of all culminates in you gaining the notoriety to kind of like challenge this old god of rock.
Yeah. You gain enough street cred that he can't help himself but to put down the books in his personal library for one night to come out for one last showdown. I like that idea quite a bit. And seeing how the town reacts, or I'm picturing it as a city, but it could be anything, seeing how the community surrounding the karaoke reacts to your rise or fall, that could really impact how you interact with all those characters in the world. That could create some interesting, both stat check conversation stuff, but also just some interesting relationship building opportunities within that world. That's kind of neat.
All right, we're at the 10 minutes, so let's end that one and come up with a name for it.
Okay. Did you have anything in mind?
Not necessarily, although I feel like making puns off of karaoke is going to be not too difficult.
If it was going to be a protagonist where you couldn't pick your gender, I was going to call it Garyoke, and we just may name the protagonist Gary and go with that. That was my brilliant idea I had, Ryan. So I'm sure that you couldn't possibly top it.
That's funny because we touched on Pokemon earlier, and famously the rival from the original run of Pokemon's was named Garyoke.
Yeah, Garyoke. Oh boy, yeah, I didn't even make that connection on purpose, but I'll pretend that I did. You'll edit this part out, right? Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Garyoke.
Yeah, Garyoke.
I like it.
Okay.
This could be a legitimate Pokemon spinoff.
Oh yeah, I would play the hell out of that game.
We can reuse all the assets. Topical humor that'll be dated in the 2 weeks that this is published. Nobody's going to care about that anymore.
No, they won't.
All right, let's go over to our community now and see what they have in store for us. These are not things that I've read beforehand, so this is going to be as new to me as it is to you. This one comes from Ashton Hermann, a good friend of the show, who writes in, says, "Hi, H&Q." Well, halfway there anyways.
I'm sorry, I'm a pale imitation, Ashton, but I hope I do you proud.
I've been mulling over a new pitch for you over the last couple weeks, and I think I've got something that could be fun. Back in the OG Xbox days, my friends and I really got into Splinter Cell, Pandora Tomorrows, and later Chaos Theory's multiplayer. For those who may not be familiar, the multiplayer mode was an asymmetrical Spies versus Mercs mode. 2 players played as the first-person mercenaries, armed with a range of defensive gadgets and a powerful automatic rifle. Spies played in third person a la Splinter Cell's single-player campaigns and had gadgets to help them distract Mercs, but very few final solutions. Their only fatal attack was a neck snap that could also be performed if you were able to successfully sneak up behind the Merc and grab them. Spies were tasked with accomplishing several objectives on each map: disarm a bomb, hack a computer, etc. Mercs were just tasked with defending those objectives until the end of the round. The series tried iterating on this multiplayer component, but I understand that latter attempts were never very well received, and I stopped playing the series after Double Agent. So here's my pitch. A similar Spies versus Mercenaries mode, but for symmetrical teams, up to 4 players each, 2 spies and 2 mercs. The basic objectives are the same, except that each team is playing both offense and defense. Maybe the players on each team even share a pool of resources, e.g. money to buy gadgets or lives. In order for the gameplay to function as it did in Splinter Cell, I'd imagine you'd have to design each map in such a way that mercenaries could never encounter other mercs and spies could never encounter other spies. I'm imagining that each team controls a base or compound and that the spies automatically spawn near an entrance to the enemies while mercs spawn within their own. That said, I think you could have some fun with intel gathering. Maybe spies could hack a computer that would briefly give their team's mercs the positions of enemy spies on their minimaps, for example. Anyway, can't wait to see what you guys come up with for this one. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. And let's go ahead and start the clock there. I think I'll begin by asking, how familiar are you with the Spies versus Mercs minigames?
Not that familiar, although I did play both those games. We didn't, me and my friends, my friend who had an original Xbox at the time, we didn't get too into the multiplayer with those. We played a lot of the campaign, but not super familiar with the multiplayer.
Okay, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think I understand the general concept. The Mercs were in first person and would play kind of as a standard shooter, whereas the Spies would be in third person and kind of Arkham Asylum their way around.
I like what Ashton said about perhaps having like a collective bank of resources, and it got me thinking in terms of Gears of War, particularly Gears of War 4 and 5, where the players, whatever side you were on, in the Horde mode, you're playing all on the COG team, you'd have a certain currency and you could pool it together to build defensive gadgets for, let's say, machine turret gun or walls or fences or whatever. So in this mode, I was kind of thinking that the Spies and Mercs would both be kind of collecting resources and then funneling it back to their bank to then provide resources for the others. So maybe the Mercs provide the resources that the Spies need to create new gadgets and the other way around. So that way it's always one hand kind of scratching the other in that mode.
Yeah. Okay. So a few weeks back, Q and I had a pitch that was kind of like a GoldenEye type thing.
Okay.
But there was one player that was playing as kind of a little robot that you would move around the
I
map,
listened to that.
And you could basically feed your gun into that to upgrade it.
Yep.
But while it's being upgraded or 3D printed, whatever it takes to get your weaponry to the next level so that you can like really have more impact and power in these confrontations when they happen, you were left defenseless. And so I really like trust between players when there's a level of having to disarm yourself to better arm your opponent. If we can have some sort of a push-pull type mechanic without necessarily having them have to occupy the same space.
Yeah, especially like if you're on the spy side and you have to give up, your tools and kind of maybe even expose yourself a little bit, really putting yourself at risk. But for the greater good of the team, that type of risk reward scenario could be very interesting.
Maybe there's like a wire that runs between the two of them and it can extend for as long as you need it to, but it shares power. Maybe it draws from the tools that they need to operate, draw so much power. And when you are powered on, then your compatriot is powered off and has to kind of like almost blindly shuffle around, to the point where like you're at such a disadvantage if you meet somebody who is powered on at the time. Okay,
yeah. So you're kind of sharing like a combined energy bank. So each side, whoever you're tied to, your compatriot there, each one of your powers takes a certain amount of energy. So it might be possible for you guys to each person to have, I can equip my night vision goggles and you can do this at the same time. But if I do my night vision goggles and I'm hacking a camera, you're kind of exposed, So that feedback between the two and striking that balance for each individual scenario, that could create some pretty unique multiplayer encounters there, I think.
This also makes me think of the really unique gameplay loop that is Five Nights at Freddy's, where you are your only real defense is to kind of monitor these animatronics by peeking in at where they currently stand in using different CCTV cameras scattered all throughout this restaurant. And you have to kind of switch between the monitors, and so you can't be watching all of them at once. You have to choose, but it's about, do you kind of rapidly hop between them so you kind of always know where everyone is, or do you spend more time focusing on one in particular to kind of lock it in place. And so maybe, maybe as you are switching off between night vision and the other character has maybe a radar that you can use to detect like the general like location or direction of an enemy. Like, do you switch between them quickly, never get a very good look, but always have like somewhat of an idea? Or do you kind of put all your eggs in one basket?
So then, I mean, that could really put you in a situation where, depending on the skill set of each player, like you might be able to spec one way knowing that you have a Merc on your team that is just, that one person's just super good at this one skill set. So you're going to put your eggs in his basket when the other players might kind of tandem up to kind of help the others by monitoring other player position or trying to hack into their cameras or to gain intel, like Ashton said. I think it'd be really neat if on top of all that, if you were to add some type of communication jamming system, if you were able to, say, invest some power or find I don't know, it seems like cheesy sci-fi movie, but like a frequency jammer or one of those things to where like you could just temporarily cut the other team's lines of communication, and that could really end up disrupting because if in this scenario where you're relying so much on knowing what the other side is doing, if the other team is able to kind of like sever that, even if just for a moment, it might be enough to send the other team into some disarray.
One of the things I've always been really interested in, and it's an idea that we played with in a really early Player Aid episode. I'm not going to be able to find the exact one, but it was one that involved kind of mech combat in a way. I've never seen a game do this before, but if you are able to not only kind of hack into your enemy's comm system, but in a way imitate them, so it can make it seem like their ally is sending them a message when really that message is coming from the enemy trying to lure you into a trap.
Like if these communications are coming in via like screen prompts or like, windows that pop up on screen, if just a prompt comes up that says, enemy in the southeast corner of map, and then you basically are just luring somebody into an area where you're baiting them for a trap. That could be, like, if we're cutting down to the spy gameplay of it, I feel that's even more true to what Ashton described as him and his friends playing when they were younger. Like, that really is focusing on a little bit more of the spy mechanic than the Merc mechanic, which I kind of feel was the spirit of the idea to begin with. So that'd be really fun. You could set up these elaborate traps, or I imagine kind of like these spy versus spy scenarios where you kind of flash some communication that sends the other team into kind of like a conundrum, and then all of a sudden the big bomb with the long fuse drops in the middle of the room and takes them all out.
Or if you determine that you're coming up on the room that one of the enemies is in, the Merc, for instance, then you can hack into their comm system, pretend you are the spy and say, I think I see something. I need all the power for my night vision.
Oh, yeah.
Get the Merc to send the power away. And then all of a sudden, like, they're a sitting duck. You can just walk in and they're not going to see it coming.
Yeah, that's some next level spy thinking there, Ryan. I think that if you might have a future in that, if you so choose, I love the idea of that, because I find that competitive multiplayer games are always so much more interesting, at least to me, when there is a real sense of forced cooperation among the team. That's why I found Overwatch so compelling for as long as I did. Not necessarily because the gameplay, well, I think is great, not to go on a tangent, but you really had to assess team role and team functionality, and communication was so paramount. You could see the difference between teams that were operating at that super high level of performance and teams that were just kind of all picking randomly and doing that. So, so team dynamic would really play into it. And you might get to a point, like if you play this game a lot, where you would know the other actions of your teammates so well. So if that prompt flashed across the screen said, I need all the power right now, you could be like, yeah, I know that's a trap. I'm not doing that. It would really, and then that might even create some interesting scenarios where you're not giving your team what they need for fear of what might happen if you do. Yeah, that'd be really cool. I'd personally be very interested in playing a game like this, because it seems pretty unique to anything I'd played before.
And I always love scenarios where you're not sure whether or not you can trust the people that you're paired up with.
Yeah, especially if you don't know your squad, or if you're, or maybe the game forces you to play with, maybe only one other person. I'm not sure, that might not work, but you know what I mean. Kind of matches you in pairs, so you're paired up with two other people that you might not know, and that could make for some really fun scenarios. It's those types of multiplayer games that I find have the longest life for me personally, is when they're kind of challenging the norms and the perceptions of what we're used to. It's not just your team deathmatch and domination and things like that. While those things have their place, it's just something like this would really feed into like the potential of what could happen and the emergent storytelling and all that stuff.
And we're out of time there again. Again, it just flies right by.
That was unbelievable. Yeah.
That's our 10 minutes. Let's close it down. Come up with a name.
No, I don't know. So I was thinking, it seems to be all about communication and intelligence gathering and recon. I like the idea of having some really generic military kind of name for this that kind of just, I'm trying to think of a right word that sums it up. Like it's not recon, it's not intel, it's like I'm looking for a short title that's kind of is like a boom, like this is, you get the idea of kind of what this is right away. But I'm kind of coming up empty. Any ideas on your end?
I was just thinking like Electricity Con, which is very bad.
Is it so bad it's good, or is it just so bad? I think it's bad.
I mean, the first thing that I thought of was Costin Powers, which is very bad.
No, that's literally my favorite name for anything I've ever heard on the show, and I've listened to a lot of Costin Powers. Oh, Ryan, I'm not joking. I love that. I love it.
I mean, if we want to use it, we can, but it's.
I'm not sure if Ashton's going to be happy, but I'm very happy with that name, Costin Powers.
All right, well, we can roll with that, and I think it'll be a real surprise. People will read the episode names first and then go into the show.
Costin Powers 2, the spy that fragged me. Oh man, it just keeps coming. Oh, that's great.
I like it. All right. That was submitted by Ashton Hermann. Thank you very much, Ashton, for submitting that one. That was actually from a while ago. We've been going a little out of order, so we appreciate you kind of hanging in there for all these months. But we are always happy to receive pitches from both the familiar names and from entirely new names. We love getting ideas and pitches from new people, and maybe Brian's appearance on the show will bring in a couple new listeners. Don't mean to say a couple in a very kind of damning with faint praise kind of way.
Not at all.
Maybe we'll bring in hundreds of new listeners.
Yeah, one of my I have dozens of followers, so I'm sure that no, I was thrilled to be here. I hope that it is received well. So
of course, and if anyone out there listening in the audience would like to submit a pitch, you can do so by going to playwrightcast.com/pitch. You can email us, playwrightcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at playwrightcast. Brian, thank you very much for joining us today. Is there anything that you would like to plug or draw attention to?
Not necessarily, Ryan. I appreciate the opportunity to come on, and as always, I'm fortunate enough to be a contributor to Cane and Rinse, and so listen to the Cane and Rinse podcast and Sound of Play and all the other wonderful Sausage Factory and this podcast, all part of the Cane and Rinse network.
Great, you're even doing Q's job when he's gone. This is fantastic. I think that the people that follow and listen to a lot of those products know that they are made by people who are very passionate and very considerate, and I'm just thrilled to be considered associated with the group. So happy to be here, and I'd love to do it again if you ever needed another fill-in. Oh, absolutely. And I guess if we can draw attention to some additional stuff on the Cane and Rinse network, that we're getting towards the end of the year. And I know that we didn't do anything like all that special last year, but we do have some more end of year stuff coming up that we're preparing for now that will be very fun, very exhausting, and it'll be quite a listen. So stay tuned for that. Both Brian and myself will be involved.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Before we go, I should also say thank you to our faithful musician who comes in to play the song live every single week. That is PROTODOME with the theme song to our podcast, Hello World, off of the album Blue Noise. Thank you for letting us continue to use this song. I
can't believe you got him to come to my house to play it this time. It's nice to have him here next to me. He's been very quiet the entire show, but I think especially
as an English gentleman. It's
I know. He came across the pond.
Not an easy trip to make.
Yeah, across the pond, and
the Miss XO19 and everything.
Yeah, he's been getting in the right frame of mind this entire time, so I think he's ready to rock.
All right, cool. Well, on the way out of the show, we like to give a miniature pitch. This is just something to chew on that we don't elaborate on further, but I guess I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to give a small miniature pitch, which is usually formed by just looking around the room and coming up with something off the top of your head, or would you like me to?
I will leave it to you.
Okay, how about a game where all of your guns have emotional problems that you have to work through or exacerbate?
Okay.
to get them to operate properly.
Okay.
We'll see you next week.